Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today, we're going to be tackling a topic that's probably pretty important to a lot of you out there, and that is dementia. Whether you're dealing with it yourself or you're caring for a loved one or you're just curious about it, we are here to give you the need-to-know information
Yes.
without, all the kind of extra stuff.
Right.
So we're going to be looking at excerpts today from Adapting to Aging.
Oh.
What is dementia? We're going to try to break it down into something that you can really use. And understand. I used to think dementia was just about, forgetting things.
Yeah.
Like how I can never remember where I put my keys. But turns out it's a lot more complex than that.
Yeah, it really is. It goes way beyond just simple forgetfulness. In fact, the first thing to understand is that dementia is not actually a single disease. It's an overall term for a group of symptoms that are caused by different brain conditions.
So it's like a category.
Exactly, a category rather than one specific illness. And these conditions, they affect more than just memory. They can also impact learning, language, mood behavior. It really affects how your brain functions on multiple levels. But here's something that might surprise you. 9 out of 10 older people don't actually develop dementia.
Wow. Okay. So
while it's a serious topic, it's important to keep things in perspective.
that's good to know.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people kind of, jump to the worst case scenario. And there's so many different types of dementia. I was reading about it the other day and I was like, oh my gosh,
Yeah. I hear you. It can be really overwhelming. There are a lot of different types.
where do we even begin?
Well, let's start by focusing on some of the most common types.
Okay.
And more importantly, what makes each one unique. So first up, we have the one that everyone has probably heard of, Alzheimer's disease.
Right. Alzheimer's disease. Isn't that the one that kind of develops slowly over time?
Yes, exactly. And that's one of the tricky things about it, because the early signs can actually be mistaken for just normal aging. You might start forgetting appointments, having trouble finding the right words, those sorts of things. But essentially what's happening in the brain is that abnormal protein clumps are building up, and they're disrupting how brain cells connect and communicate with each other.
Okay.
So a key difference between typical aging and Alzheimer's is that with Alzheimer's, the memory loss becomes increasingly disruptive to daily life. It's not just forgetting an appointment, it's forgetting how to get there altogether.
So it's the severity and the impact it has.
Exactly. It's about the impact on your everyday life.
Okay. So what about the other types?
Well, let's move on to vascular dementia. This one can be a bit more sudden, and it's often triggered by a stroke.
A stroke. Oh, wow.
Yeah, but vascular dementia can also develop more gradually due to smaller strokes or just the general wear and tear on the brain's blood vessels. Essentially what happens is that the brain isn't getting enough oxygen and the cells start to die off.
So it's like a domino effect.
Yeah, you could say that. Damage to the blood vessels leads to damage in the brain itself.
And what kind of symptoms are we looking at with that one?
Well, the symptoms really depend on which part of the brain is affected, but some common ones include memory loss, confusion, difficulty speaking, and even problems with walking.
Okay. So it can manifest in a lot of different ways.
It really can. It varies a lot depending on which brain areas are impacted.
So it's hard to pin down.
Yes, exactly. Now let's talk about Lewy body dementia.
Right.
This one's particularly interesting because it often involves hallucinations.
Hallucination.
Yes. Oh, it's a whole other level. Imagine seeing things that aren't really there, like people or animals or hearing voices. It can be very distressing.
Oh, I bet.
In this type of dementia, clumps of protein called Lewy bodies build up in the brain, and they disrupt those vital nerve connections. And in addition to hallucinations, you might also see movement issues like stiff muscles and tremors, trouble sleeping, and even sudden fluctuations in alertness and attention.
Wow. So it's not just memory problems with this one.
No, not at all. It's a whole mix of cognitive and physical symptoms.
Okay. That's got to be tough to deal with.
It is. It's a very challenging condition. Now, moving on, we have frontotemporal dementia, or FTD for short.
FTD. Okay. And this one often strikes younger people.
That's right. Typically between 45 and 65 years old.
Wait, so dementia can affect younger people too?
Absolutely. In fact, any dementia that appears before the age of 65 is classified as early onset dementia.
Early onset dementia. Okay, we'll have to dig into that a little bit later, but for now, let's stick with FTD.
Okay, sounds good.
So what's going on with FTD?
Well, this type primarily affects your behavior, personality, and language skills.
What kind of changes are we talking about here?
Well, think personality shifts, maybe becoming more impulsive or socially inappropriate. Some people lose interest in things they used to enjoy, while others might develop unusual eating habits or compulsions. The specific changes really depend on which parts of the frontal and temporal lobes are damaged. These are the areas of the brain responsible for planning organization, emotions, and language.
Right. So it's like your whole personality can shift.
It can. It's a real curveball because it often hits people in their prime, impacting their work relationships and overall sense of self.
Wow. I can't imagine. And you said this is more common in younger people.
That's right. Which is why it's often overlooked or misdiagnosed at first. People might attribute the changes to stress or a midlife crisis or even mental health issues.
So it's tough to diagnose.
It can be. And to make things even trickier, early onset dementia can sometimes have a genetic link, which adds another layer of complexity to the diagnostic process.
Okay, so we've got Alzheimer's, vascular dementia, Lewy body, and FTD.
Yeah.
That's a lot to take in.
It is.
Before we jump into the importance of early diagnosis, can you tell me more about this early onset dementia?
Sure. Like I mentioned, early onset dementia simply means any type of dementia that develops before the age of 65. The challenge is that doctors don't always think dementia when someone is relatively young, so this can lead to delays in diagnosis.
Right.
Plus, the symptoms might be more subtle or attributed to other factors, making it even harder to pinpoint.
So you're saying it's difficult to diagnose?
It can be. It's like trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces.
Yeah.
But the key takeaway here is awareness. If you're noticing significant changes in your thinking behavior or abilities, regardless of your age, don't brush it off. Talk to your doctor and be your own advocate. Early diagnosis can make a world of difference.
Expert.
Speaking of early diagnosis, that's actually what I wanted to touch on next.
Okay.
It can really make a huge difference.
Okay, I'm all ears. Early diagnosis. I think that's where the rubber meets the road for a lot of our listeners. Because it's like, okay, well, when should I actually start to worry about this? And when should I seek help?
Right, and early diagnosis is not about panicking at all. It's about empowering yourself with knowledge and options. First of all, it allows you to start treatment sooner.
Wait, hold on. Treatments for dementia. I always thought it was like, you get it, and that's it.
That's a common misconception. While there's no cure for most types of dementia, there are medications and therapies that can help manage the symptoms, improve quality of life, and provide support for both the individual and their caregivers.
That makes sense. That's a huge relief to hear. I think a lot of people just think it's like, oh, that's too bad, you know.
Right, but there's actually a lot that can be done.
So early diagnosis means you're not fighting this battle alone.
Exactly. You've got tools and strategies to help you along the way.
So in addition to treatment, what else does early diagnosis give us?
Well, early diagnosis also gives you access to a wealth of information and support. Think about organizations like the Alzheimer's Society. They offer education about dementia, coping strategies, support groups, and they can connect you with local resources as well.
So it's all about building that support system.
Yes. It's about having a whole team in your corner.
Okay, so what if I'm just noticing like a few memory slips here and there? Should I just automatically assume it's dementia?
That's a great question, and the answer is no.
Yeah.
Not all memory lapses are a sign of dementia. There are plenty of other things that can cause similar symptoms.
Like what?
Well, think stress, lack of sleep, vitamin deficiencies, even side effects from certain medications.
Okay, so don't jump to conclusions.
Exactly. It's important to rule out other possibilities.
So what should be the first step if somebody's concerned?
The first step is simple: talk to your doctor.
Okay. Your GP is a great starting point.
Your GP can assess the situation, rule out other potential causes, and, if necessary, refer you to a specialist or a memory clinic for further evaluation.
So have that open conversation.
Yes, don't be afraid to advocate for yourself or a loved one.
And don't forget, you know, a lot of times family and friends can notice these changes.
Absolutely. Sometimes they notice them even before the person themselves does. So if you're noticing something's off, encourage your loved one to seek medical advice.
Right. It takes a village.
It does.
Okay, so speaking of a village, I think it's important to address the social and emotional side of dementia because there's a lot of fear.
You're right. There's a lot of stigma attached to it.
And our source material actually says that dementia is much more than just a health issue. It's a social issue.
I love that quote. It really puts things in perspective.
But why is there so much fear and stigma?
Well, I think it stems from a lack of understanding. People don't know much about dementia, so they fill in the blanks with assumptions and stereotypes. They might see it as a loss of personhood, a descent into oblivion, but that's simply not true. People with dementia are still people.
Right? They still have feelings,
Yeah.
memories,
Yeah.
and the capacity for joy and connection.
Exactly.
So how do we break down those misconceptions then?
Well, it starts with education and awareness. The more we learn about dementia, the more we can challenge those outdated beliefs. And it's about having open and honest conversations like we're doing right now.
Right. To normalize the topic and dispel those myths.
Exactly.
So it's like anything else. The more we talk about it, the less scary it becomes.
Exactly.
But what can we do on like a personal level? How can we support those living with dementia in a meaningful way?
Well, think about it this way. How would you want to be treated if you were in their shoes? With respect, patience, and understanding, right?
Right.
Simple gestures can go a long way. Listen attentively, engage them in conversations, focus on their abilities rather than their limitations,
Okay.
and don't underestimate the power of humor. A good laugh can brighten anyone's day.
That's so important. It's about treating people with dignity and recognizing their individuality.
Yes.
It's not about, putting them in a box and being like, oh, they're a dementia patient.
Right.
It's like, no, this is a person.
Yes.
First and foremost. And remember, support isn't just for the person with dementia. It's for their caregivers as well.
That's a really important point. Caring for someone with dementia can be incredibly challenging, both physically and emotionally.
Yeah.
So offer a helping hand, a listening ear, or simply a break from the routine. It all makes a difference.
It really does. It takes a village to navigate this journey.
It does.
Okay, so let's recap the key takeaways for our listeners here. First off, dementia is not a normal part of aging.
Right. It's caused by specific brain conditions, and it can affect people of all ages, although it's more common as we get older.
And early diagnosis is crucial.
Yes.
It opens the door to treatment support.
Yeah.
And gives individuals and their families time to plan for the future.
That's great.
And remember, while dementia is a serious condition, it's not a death sentence. People with dementia can still live fulfilling lives with the right support and understanding.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm feeling a bit more hopeful already. What about some practical steps? What should someone do if they're concerned about themselves or a loved one?
Well, the first and most important step is to talk to your GP. They can assess the situation, rule out other causes, and refer you to the appropriate specialist if needed.
Okay, so the GP is the first step.
That's right.
What happens after that?
Well, depending on the situation, your GP might refer you to a specialist, like a neurologist or a geriatrician.
Or to a memory clinic.
Yes. For a more in-depth evaluation, these specialists, they're experts in diagnosing and managing dementia. And they can help create a personalized care plan that addresses your specific needs and challenges.
So it's like a multidisciplinary approach.
Exactly. Getting different experts involved to get a clearer picture.
And don't forget the Alzheimer's Society.
Yes. They're a fantastic resource. They offer a wealth of information, support groups, and they can even connect you with local services. That can make a real difference in your day-to-day life.
So we really do have a lot of tools at our disposal.
We do. From medical professionals to support organizations, there's help available every step of the way.
And that's the message we want to leave our listeners with.
Absolutely. You don't have to face this alone.
Okay. I think we've covered a lot of ground today. I feel a lot more informed and empowered.
That's great to hear.
But just to recap, what are the top 3 takeaways our listeners should remember?
Okay, well, I'd say the first one is that dementia is not a normal part of aging. It's caused by specific brain conditions. And it's important to recognize the signs and seek medical advice if you have any concerns.
Which leads perfectly into takeaway number 2. Early diagnosis is key.
It is. The sooner you have a diagnosis, the sooner you can access treatment and support and start planning for the future.
And last but not least, takeaway number 3. Let's not forget the social and emotional side of dementia.
That's so important. Breaking down stigma, showing compassion, and offering support to both individuals with dementia and their caregivers can truly make a world of difference.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we're going to wrap up our deep dive into understanding dementia. Hopefully you found this episode informative and empowering, and maybe even a little bit hopeful.
I hope so. Remember, knowledge is power. The more we understand about dementia, the better equipped we are to face its challenges with courage and grace.
Thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, stay curious and keep learning.